Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another exciting episode in the Kotlin Messenger series. Really hope you guys are doing well today, and I hope you're ready to move on with additional features for our application, right? So why don't we go ahead and start with what is on the agenda for today, which is episode 4. And basically the first thing we have to take care of is to launch the application inside of the latest messages screen instead of the current registration pages, right? So that screen looks like this over here, the latest messages activity. And the next thing we have to do is to allow the user to sign out of our application by including a button all the way on the top right over here. And then the third thing we have to take care of is the new message activity. And I'll show you what that looks like right now by clicking on that. And so this is the new messages page, which allows you to click on a user that you want to send a new message to. And so these are the 3 pieces of main functionality that we want to work on in today's video. Now, as you can already see, we have a ton of lists and a ton of images inside of our application right now. And the way we are going to make our lives a lot easier is to use some third-party dependencies inside of our app. And the first one is called Groupie, which is going to allow us to create really fast and easy adapters for our recycler views. And so recycler views are pretty much these vertical lists right here and also right here. And it usually takes us a long time, but Groupie makes it really, really fast. And then the second dependency is called Picasso. And this is an image caching loading library that is going to allow us to load images inside of these circular image view guides on the left side here, as well as on the main screen over there. All right, and then finally, if we have enough time, maybe we'll get to the keyboard management feature of our application, but definitely no guarantees there. So this is the agenda for today. Let's hop back into Android Studio and pick up where we left off in the last lesson. So let's get started right now. Alrighty, everybody, let's get started by going back into Android Studio right over here. And the first thing I would like to do is to remind you where we left off in the very last lesson, which is basically a register activity, and that is this screen in the green on the right side. We are now able to save all of the information regarding our user by using this method called save user to Firebase database all the way at the bottom over here. And so what I would like to do now is to actually show you how we can proceed after we save our user to the database. And the way I'm going to do that is to introduce some lines inside of this success listener down here. And the way I'm going to do this is to introduce a brand new activity inside of our application. So click on that, and you can create a new Kotlin file class, but this activity over here is going to be a little bit easier for us. So let's create an empty activity and call it something like latest messages activity, like so. Seems like a pretty straightforward name for our activity. And the advantage of using the empty activity over here, empty activity, is because whenever you do that, it actually helps you introduce the activity inside of your manifest file. So it's a lot faster. And it also creates your layout file inside of the resources. So you can see the latest messages screen in the white over there. So definitely use that instead because it's a lot quicker. And so now that we have our file inside of our application, let's go ahead and launch this activity somehow. And so inside of your success listener, we will simply call start activity using some kind of intent, which I'll define up here. So intent, we are going to use the context of this and the latest messages activity we just created. We'll get the class out of it with : class Java. All right, so pretty awesome stuff. And you want to start this activity like so. And something else I'll show you how to do is to clear off all of the previous activities on your stack, or your activity stack really. And the way to do that is to use the flags, and you want to set this guy equal to something like intent, and we are going to clear, let's see, what is the code exactly here? I have it on my other screen. We will call flag activity clear task, and you want to use a OR on this guy and set another intent, and we will use flag activity new class, which is over here, new task rather. And so now that I have these 3 lines of code inside of the register activity, we are going to launch the latest messages activity every time we create a new user. All right, so what is that going to look like? Well, I'm going to create a new user, and I have some more photos in my devices now. And so this guy is called, let's see, Jamie and Lannister. And for the email, we will say jamielannister@gmail.com. Maybe we want to introduce a space in his name. And for the password, we'll just punch in something easy to remember. And whenever I hit the register, we are going to create this user, upload the image to storage, and we are going to launch this new activity over here. And so whenever you introduce these flags like this, you can actually hit the back button like so, and it'll bring you back to the desktop of your device. If you don't use this, it'll actually bring you back to the register activity. So make sure to include this inside of your code. All right, so that sounds pretty good. And everything is working nicely, except for the fact that whenever you relaunch your application, you actually get the register page right over here, which isn't exactly what we want. So I'm going to show you how to fix that by going over to the manifest file. And why don't we bring the latest messages activity to the top over there. And we also want to include this intent filter as well. So punch that in there. And this allows your activity to be a main launcher. So once you have that and you reload your app, this screen right here, the latest messages screen, is going to show up as the very first activity for your application. And that's kind of what we want, right? We don't really want the user to have to constantly log into their application if they don't have to. All right, so that looks pretty good. And inside of the latest messages activity, we can actually perform a check to see whether or not the user is logged into Firebase. So let me show you how to do that with Firebase auth, get instance, and we can call a UID like so. So val UID equals that. And if UID, so UID, if this is equal to null, then we know that the user is not logged into our application. All right, so whenever this is the case, we are going to start an activity with the intent. And let's create the intent really quickly here, intent, and we'll use this for the context. And we need the register activity, and we'll just get the class out of it like so. And we'll use the intent like that. And what we should also do is to include the flags that we had over here so that we can clear off the back stack. And we'll just punch that in right below. All right, so that's pretty good. And we can actually move this to a new method. So, verify user is logged in, and we'll just create that right below. And we'll just use some autocomplete and paste that code in there. And that's a pretty solid way to check for the user's authentication. So once you run your app again, you'll see that the user is actually logged in, so we are not starting the brand new activity. Okay, so that is a pretty good start for us. And what I would like to do now is to show you how you can include a button all the way on the top right over there. And so you actually have to override a method on here. So on the options menu created, so on create options menu right here. Okay, so for this method right here, you actually have to inflate your menu somehow. So you want to get access to menu inflator, which is part of your activity. And you want to inflate a menu resource into this menu object over here. So this is your menu resource, and then you just want to pump in your menu, which is that guy. And so what exactly is your menu resource? Well, you have to create a new resource inside of a directory called menu, so menu over there. And inside of your menu, you can now create a menu resource file like this. So I'm going to call this nav menu. You can feel free to call it whatever you want. And basically for the text of this menu, you can now say item like this, so item, and you'll have a couple of options or attributes to fill out. The first is going to be the ID, and the ID we will call this, let's see, sign out, or let's see, menu sign out. That's probably a little bit more explicit. And we can say title as well. So this title we can say sign out, and then we'll just close it off like that. I believe you can also say show as action if there is room, and that'll put it all the way in the nav bar like so. All right, so that looks pretty good. The other thing that we probably want to include is the new message item. So Android and ID, let's see, ID, menu and new message, and let's say title of new message as well. And then we'll say show as action if there is room. All right, so that looks pretty good. I will actually like to shuffle this around so that it's flipped in reverse order like that. That looks a little bit better. And now that we have this menu resource called, let's see, nav menu, we can go back to the latest messages activity. And this guy, you can now say r.menu.nav menu like that. And you can run your application again. And so whenever you are creating your activity, it's going to look inside of this method called options menu create, and it's going to launch your menu inside of the nav bar like so. All right, so that's how we create our menu. And on here, I believe we have this method called on options item selected. And so whenever you click on one of these guys, you are firing off this method over here. So let me show you what you want to do. And so we want to actually get the ID out of this guy, so item ID. And so this represents the actual ID that you created in your menu. So these two IDs over here, menu, new message, and sign up. And so let's actually check something here. So I'm going to say where and item.item ID. And I believe I want to use a question mark over here. And I'll just specify that. And so I believe this is a when instead. So when, and then inside of this is basically a switch case. And so we are going to say, let's see, r.id.menu, and we'll say new message, and we'll specify an arrow like so. And then all you gotta do is the same thing for the other menu item, which is sign out. And so you'll handle each one of your menu options separately in these two cases, or these two switch cases over here. So whenever we sign out, we can actually say firebase auth.getInstance and just sign out like that. And upon doing so, you want to launch the registration activity, very similar to what we have up there. So we are going to run our application now and verify that whenever we tap on the sign out, we actually launch this register activity, which is this over there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And what I can do now is I can just log into my other account, or I can just create a brand new account again. So let's see what we want to do here. I will create an Egret account right now. So let's say Egret, and for the email, we'll just punch in that at gmail.com, 1, 2, 3. And so now that our form is entirely filled out, we can hit the register button right over there. It is going to create our user, upload the image to storage, and then finally present ourselves with the latest messages activity screen in the white. All right, so that's pretty good. And now what we would like to do is to enable the new message button all the way in the menu up at the top. And so whenever I click on this guy, I would like to present the new message activity. And that kind of looks like this over here, right? So new message, we just have a very simple list of users that belong inside of our database. So that's going to be created inside of this directory as well. So let's create a brand new empty activity. And I will call this guy new message activity, spell that correctly, hit the enter. And there we go, we have our brand new activity. And so let's head back into the latest messages, which is this screen over there. And somewhere up here when we are selecting the options, inside of the new message case, which is right over here, we are going to create a new intent like so. Create this intent object and use this as the context. We will say new message activity and use that class. And finally, we will start this activity and present this intent like so. All right, so that looks pretty good. And let me just run my application one more time and show you what this looks like. And I'll demo this intent without these flags. So hitting the new message like so, we see our new message. And if we hit back, we actually get the latest messages activity right over here in the white. All right, so that's pretty good. And what I would like to do is whenever I hit this new message like so, I actually want a back button to show up on the top left, right? So the way to do that is to actually go inside of your manifest, and all the way down here for the new message activity, you want to specify a parent for this guy. And so the syntax looks a little bit strange, but I have it on another screen over here. And what you want to do is to include something called a metadata tag of parent activity. And for this guy, the actual value is the parent you want to use. So it's called latest messages activity. And once you have this, you'll see that the top of the nav bar is going to look a little bit different. So clicking on this message right here, now you see the back button show up like so. All right, so new message and the back button, just like that. So pretty awesome and pretty easy, right? Okay, so moving on here, I would like to also change the new message activity title up at the nav bar to actually say something like select user. So new message activity. I believe we can say support action bar dot title and say select user. And we probably need a question mark over there. So run this one more time. I believe that should change the top. And now we have select user up at the very top nav bar. Okay, so that's kind of where we are with the new message activity. And instead of just showing a blank white screen like this, we should probably get a vertical list going inside of the white there. And the way I will do that is to go inside of the resources layout, and let's go inside of activity new message. And that's this over here. What we want to introduce is a recycler view, which is inside of the layouts or containers. So this is the recycler view. You just want to simply drag it in here. And if you haven't downloaded it yet, you'll be presented with this screen. So just hit the OK, and that'll download the necessary packages. And you probably need to align this up at the top left and also the right, and then finally down here, just so that you can span the entire width and height of your screen. And so clicking on this, I believe we want to do that, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so last thing you probably want to do is to change the margins to 0, 0, and then 0 again, just so that you can get it to the edges. So this right here, you probably want to match constraint, so that is going to match the left and right. And then you want to do the same thing for the height, and that'll get it fully width and height of the actual activity. Okay, so that's what our recycler view is. And now what you want to do is to give this guy some kind of meaningful ID. So recycle view, and the actual new message is the activity that we are in. So I'll just call it that. And so going back to new message activity, we want to present a list of users inside of this screen somehow. And we are going to do that by saying recycler view, new message, and we have to set up some kind of adapter on it. And we also always have to set up something called a layout manager, right? So you can do this inside of code. So it's linear layout manager like this. That's kind of what you need to do. And I believe you need to pass in the context like that. But you can also set the layout manager inside of the XML, which is a little bit nicer. So going back to here, go back to your recycler view, hit the text, and somewhere in here, let's say for your recycler view component, you want to say linear or layout manager like that, and it'll pop up with a couple of different options. So just pick the linear layout manager, and I believe that's pretty good. So I'm going to run my code again, and let's see, new message activity. We should be able to see pretty much the same thing for the new message. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so now the question is, what exactly is this adapter object that we need to set on this recycler view here? So what belongs on the right side for these question marks? Well, typically when you're setting up a list view for your Android app, you have to provide a custom adapter for your recycler view. And I guess in other words, you have to provide some kind of custom class, a custom adapter. This guy needs to subclass the recycler view adapter. And then next you have to create some kind of view holder thing, right? And for this class, you need to override a couple of different methods. And as you can see, this is a lot of tedious code that we don't really want to write all the time. So, this is super tedious, and I don't really want to implement all of the methods inside of here. So the trick is you can actually use some third-party libraries that will make your life a lot easier and reduce a lot of code. And the way I'm going to show you how to get this to work is to browse over to a library called Groupie. So you can type in Groupie on Android, and right over here you can find this library created by Lisa Ray, I believe her name is. And so you can read what it does, but basically Groupie allows you to create an adapter super quickly. And I'll show you how to do it right now, but first I need to actually download it inside of my Gradle file. So let's just move that out of the way there and go back to the Gradle file. Somewhere down here, you want to say compile, and let's just replace compile with implementation. You can sync now and you'll download Groupie inside of your project. And while I'm already here, let me also download Picasso. So Picasso, and that's not what I want. Let's use Android. Click on the Square Picasso Library. And so this is just a very typical image caching library that pretty much everyone uses when they're creating their Android app. And the way to install it is to copy this line and paste that into your Gradle file. So you can put it anywhere you want. Sync one more time to download that inside of your project. And everything looks pretty good. Again, you can just ignore this red line for now. Doesn't really affect your project too much. And so let's head back into new message activity. And so the question still remains, what exactly is this adapter over there? Well, let me create it for you using the Groupie Adapter. So Groupie Adapter. Hopefully you will come up for me, Groupie Adapter. So Group Adapter, and this guy you need to implement some kind of view holder generic. And let's just create it with the empty constructor like so. And so we're actually going to use this adapter all the way over there. And if you run your project, you're not going to see any changes. So let me just show you what that looks like. And let's go over to new message, and everything still looks like a white screen, which is obviously not what we want. We actually want to show some users over here, right? So the users will look something like this, but we're not seeing anything yet because this adapter doesn't have any objects inside of it. And all we gotta do is to actually add some things inside of the adapter. And the question now is, what is the actual object we need to add? Well, I'm going to create an actual resource over here called user item. So this is a class, and this is my user item class. And let's see, I'm going to subclass the item that comes from Groupie. And I believe you need to create a view holder like that. And I think you might also need to call the constructor like so as well. And if you mouse over this, you actually need to implement the get layout method. So I'm going to say get layout like so, and just remove the to do. And the next one is to actually implement the bind function. So it says bind, just type that out, hit enter, and remove the to do as well. And so this line of code over here and over here might seem a little bit confusing, but let me show you what we actually need for the layout. And so the layout over here is actually going to render out each one of these rows inside of our user page. And so what you need to do is to return some kind of integer. And the thing is, you want to return some kind of layout file. And so that's going to belong inside of our resources over here inside of layout. And then for the bind, this guy will be called in our list for each user object later on. And so right now, let me go ahead and show you how we can create our resource inside of our layout directory. And so for each one of these rows right here, we're just going to simply create a user row resource. So right click on your layout, create a new layout resource. I will call this guy user row and end it with new message, hit enter. And we'll get something that looks like this. You can drag in some kind of text view like that over there. You can drag in pretty much whatever you want, so a button as well. And they're not aligned correctly, but I just want to have some things inside of there so that I can see it in my list later on. And so that's kind of what I have for my user row. We can go back to new message activity, and this guy over here, you can just say layout.userRow. Okay, so that's our user item that we're going to actually add inside of our group adapter. And the way I'm going to actually construct it is to simply say user item and create an empty one. You can punch in a couple of more and you'll get 3 of them like so. And I'll run my project now, and I'll pretty much get 3 objects inside of my list. So let me click on this guy, and we get that button and some text behind it that you can't really see, but if you drag up and down this list, you'll see 3 of these buttons like so. And that's how easy it is to use this group adapter. You just want to make sure you provide the user item, provide your layout, and add it inside of your group, and you should be good to go. The one problem that we probably want to fix here is you see how these items are extremely tall, right? So it fits the entire screen, and that's obviously not what we want. And the way to fix that is to go into your user row, go to the text over here, and for the entire component, it's actually using the layout height of match parent. And so just use wrap content, and it'll just wrap the objects inside of it. And running your code one more time with the instant run, you'll see the changes pretty much immediately over there. And so that looks pretty good. And what we want to do now is to go back into design, and let's actually fix up what our user row looks like, right? So we want to have something that has an image view on the left of it over there, and then the username on the right of it. So this guy will be the username. You can actually say username if you wanted to do that. And on the left of it, we actually want to put in some kind of image view. So I'm just going to drag this in there for now. And you can select whatever you want. And let's just use maybe this X button. And so that's what you get. The next thing you want to do is to probably pin this to the top like that. And also pin this to the left. I'll just use 8, 8, or maybe 16 and 16. That looks a lot better. For the width and height, I'll use maybe 50 or even 60 dp, and then 60 dp for the height as well. So that's a lot taller. I'm going to pin this to the right of the image view. And for this, I'm going to center it in the middle of this guy vertically. So I'm going to pin the top and bottom like that. And that'll bring it down to the bottom, hopefully. So get that down there. Let me just try to match this on the right side. And hopefully I can pin that down over there. So that gets it in the middle. You probably want to change this to match constraint so that you can get it on the left side. I'll pop this to the right a little bit with 16. And that looks pretty good. Let me go back to the text over here. And what I would like to do is I would like to change this to the circle image view that we built out in the last episode. So I'll just use a circle like that. You can still see it, but it's just not showing up as an icon. I guess I'll remove the source compat. Maybe I'll just leave it there. And the final thing I would like to do is to change the text size, maybe 16 dp or sp. The text style, maybe something like bold. And maybe the text color as well to be Android black. And that looks a little bit better. Let's zoom in a little bit, and it looks kind of like that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'll try to run my code again, and let's see if it actually comes out inside of my app with new message. And now the username looks like that. We have the image view on the left side, but because we don't have an image in there, it's not really showing up for us. So let's fix that by, actually getting the users inside of our database to show up in this list here. And so back inside of our database, let's see all of our users. We have about 6 users here, and so we have Jamie Lannister, Jon Snow, and etc. And the question is, how exactly do we fetch these users from Firebase, right? Well, let's try to fetch them inside of the onCreate method for new message activity. So down here, I'll say fetch users, and this is a new method I'll create right below. And so let's see, private. It's always better to create a private function, so we'll just do that. And inside of fetch users, we have to access a reference from Firebase. So Firebase, I think I need a capital F. Firebase database, get the instance, and then we need to call something like get reference. And so I'm going to access all of the users inside of the users node like that. And so value ref, set that equals to that. The next thing we need to do is to set some kind of listener on this guy. Now you have a couple of different options, but what you want to do is to just use a single value event listeners. These other things will constantly get called whenever you are changing your data. So this guy is a lot safer. And for the value event listener, the syntax is a little bit tricky. It took me a while to figure out what to actually type here, but you need to do something like this, so value event listener, and just use a brace like so. And if you highlight over this guy, it'll tell you to implement a couple of methods, and it'll say on canceled. You can probably remove that. I don't think I need it. And on here, you need the other one called on data change, and that error will go away. All right, so this method over here, this on data change, will get called every time you retrieve all of the users inside of Firebase database. And so the way I can show you how that works is to use a log statement. So P0 is the actual snapshot that contains all of your data, so P0. And on this guy, you have something called children. So I'm going to execute a for each loop on the children. And to access each object, you can just say it. And this guy is an actual data snapshot. You can say toString like that to get the string out of it. And let me just log this out with log D. And what do we want to do? New message maybe. And we'll print out that as the message on the right side. And so if I run the code now, you'll hopefully see something down in the console below. So new message, and down here, we should be able to get something, right? So you see new message, and we get all of these values for the snapshot. We get the key, we get the UID, we get the profile image URL, and then all the way on the right side, we get the user names as well. So that's how we iterate through all of the users inside of our Firebase database. And as you can see, it's pretty easy to get the data out of the Firebase area, right? Now what we would like to do is to present all of this information inside of our list somehow. And so let me show you how to convert this data into something a lot easier that we can work with. And what I'm going to do is to convert these values, this it value, to some kind of user object. So user equals it.getValue. You can just pump in a class for this parameter over here. And what we need to do is to actually pump in the user class that we created. So user class.java. If you command click into this guy, it's actually this all the way inside of register activity. You probably want to put this in a model file later on, but I'll ignore that for now. And we'll go back to message activity. What we want to do inside of here is we actually want to construct our user items and then add it inside of this adapter guy. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this project again, and I believe it'll crash for another unrelated issue. So I'll hit the new message over here, and we'll see a crash down here. So let's fix this crash first. And it's always better to read the messages. That way you can figure out what's going on. It says that the user class does not define a no argument constructor, and something about ProGuard on the right side. And let me show you what the fix is by going back into the user class, inside of register activity. For this guy, we want to define a constructor, and we will say colon, and we'll say this, and empty string, and empty string. And this is pretty much your no argument constructor over here. All right, so this is just new Kotlin syntax that you have to get used to. It took me a while to figure out that code, but that's definitely how you would fix it. And now what you can do is you can run your code again, and you'll no longer get this red error inside of your app. Click on new message, and everything looks good to go there. And the last thing you need to do is we want to say something like adapter.add objects inside of here somehow. And you see how this adapter is actually outside of this fetch user function. What I'll do is I'll just create a brand new adapter. So adapter equals group adapter. This guy will be the view holder guy again, construct it like that. And inside of here, I want to say adapter like this dot add object. And you can say user item like that and just create it. And then after you are finished iterating through all of the children, you can say RecyclerView dot adapter equals the adapter from there. And finally, you can run your code again. And I'll just hit that and run this, hit on the new message again. And what you'll get is you'll have 6 username rows inside of your list now, right? So that's a lot better than what we had before. That represents the 6 users inside of Firebase over there. And what is left for us to do is to actually fill out the username on the right side, which is pretty easy to do. All we have to do is to maybe change the user item over here. And we're going to add some code inside of the bind function. So I guess I'll just show you what the code looks like. I'm going to add in a property for user item, and I'll use this bit of syntax. So val, user, and user. That is our actual user object. And inside of this over here, we now have an error that we need to pass in a user. So we're going to pass that in over there. And that looks pretty good. This guy is actually a optional user. So you can make a check up here. So user, if it's not equal to null, then we will add this guy in there, and that'll fix that error. And then inside of this bind function, we're going to modify this user name guy. And so I believe what I need to do is I need to go back into my user row, new message, and let's go back to design. So this is our row, our text view. Let's give it a more meaningful ID. And so username, text view, and new message, whatever you want to call this guy. Make sure you spell it correctly. And let's go back to new message activity. Inside of this bind function, we can actually access that particular UI component. So you just want to say view holder.item view, which will get you to your actual view. And over here, you can say username text view of your new message activity row thing. So inside of here, you can now say text equals user.username like that. So now that our bind function is somewhat more complete, we can run our code one more time and see what this does for our row over here. And we have a compiler error, so let me see what it is. So we have user parameter. And the problem is that inside of the new message activity, we have this dummy data that we were creating earlier. I guess I'll just comment it out for now, and we'll run our code again. And this will hopefully work this time. So our app is up, hit the new message over here, and you'll see the user names are now correctly being filled out on the right side. So that looks pretty good. The one thing we are missing is the actual image on the left side. So let's see how to do that by first going back to our row for the actual image view. We will create a new ID. So this will be the image view for the new message row. And I guess that looks okay. And now what I would like to do is I can actually give this guy some properties inside of the text over here. So for the circle image view, which is that guy, we can say border width and maybe give it 2 dp. And you don't really see it right off the bat there, but that should be okay. I feel like this guy is a little bit low, so you can actually give the entire parent a bottom margin. So margin bottom, and maybe give it something like 8 dp or 16 dp. Or maybe just give the top. I think the top probably works a little bit better. So margin top. And that kind of looks like what I want. And now what I can do is I can probably run again. And let's see what that effect has inside of my new message screen. So new message. And so everything is lowered a little bit. And let's now try to actually load the image inside of the image view. So this is pretty easy. It probably takes one more line of code. We are going to go back into user item. So whenever we are inside of the bind function, we can now say something like Picasso, which is our image caching library. We can say get, and we'll load some kind of URI. And let's just pass in user profile image URL, and we can load it into some kind of target. So let's just say into image view, and we can say view holder dot item view. And we'll say image view of new message. And now we can run again. Hopefully this will work. And we are now going to get images inside of our list over here. So we have a couple of egret images, and then we have Jamie Lannister, and we have everything else inside of the bottom over there. Okay, so as you can pretty much see here, it's a lot easier to use Groupie Adapter to create your recycler view, right? It doesn't require us to override all of these functions and create this view holder object. We only need to provide a user item, provide your actual row that you want for your layout, and you get your bind function here for each one of your rows that you want to modify the data for. So super easy stuff. And then finally, the Picasso library allows you to load images very easily just using one line of code. And this is going to save you a lot of time inside of your future projects. So I really recommend using these libraries whenever you can. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And in the next lesson, we are going to handle the action of selecting one of these new users, and we're going to present the actual chat log activity that handles the real-time messaging. So hopefully you're excited for that. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye, guys.